Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 2013 series Morbius, the Living Vampire, part of Marvel Now. The Comics Code Authority must have really been a weird thing, because believe it or not, the restrictions on what could and couldn't be allowed to be depicted in comic books once extended to creatures of the night and the supernatural. But in the far-out 70s, some of those restrictions lifted, and comic book creators jumped on the chance to expand the market, and from Marvel in particular, we quickly saw an explosion of characters in titles like Man-Wolf, Tomb of Dracula, Blade, Vampire Tales, and, of course, Morbius, the Living Vampire. There were, just like a lot of comic covers of vampires holding prone women at this time. Just like, a lot. Morbius would be introduced first in the very first issue of Amazing Spider-Man to not be written by the late great Stan Lee, but instead by Roy Thomas, which was issue 101. Morbius himself would be brought into the story primarily to solve a problem dealing with Spider-Man's rather embarrassing growth of 4 additional arms. What? Of course I was talking about arms. What did you think I was talking about? Though they wouldn't use the term in these 2 initial issues, he would almost immediately become known as a living vampire. Or really, the living vampire, because rather than being under some supernatural curse like most vampires, his vampirism was a result of science, bitch. The comic I'm about to cover goes into it in detail, so more on this later, but real quick I'll go ahead and say that he ran an experiment dealing with vampire bats in order to treat a unique blood condition he suffered from. It worked, essentially, but it also gave him fangs and made him thirst for blood. I mean, what treatment doesn't have wacky side effects? That's just progress. Morbius would continue on to make appearances throughout the Marvel Universe, sometimes as a villain and sometimes as a somewhat reluctant hero, and even play a somewhat important role in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which is how I first came into awareness of him. All of this eventually leading to where we are today, looking at his second self-titled comic as part of Marvel Now, as opposed to Marvel Then, or Marvel Soon, or Marvel maybe after lunch if I don't take a nap instead. Oh, and I guess also he has like a movie now or something, I suppose. I mean, who would want to watch a video about this guy, am I right? Oh, you? You would? Oh, well that's great news. Then be sure to stick around as we take this away. The comic opens on issue 699. Point 1 of Amazing Spider-Man. Why is it 699.1 and not just 700, you ask? I don't know. Because they wanted to end the series on issue 700, but also I guess were for some reason required to also do this issue? I don't know. Comics are dumb sometimes. Anyway, as this mock-up Daily Bugle front page tells us, Doc Ock, close to death, staged a jailbreak from the supervillain prison, The Raft, which could probably only compete with Arkham Asylum in the running for least secure supervillain prison in comics. This story was part of the build-up to having a dying Dr. Octopus take over Peter Parker's body and become Spider-Man. Or a superior Spider-Man, as he would call himself, although, you know, it really wasn't. But I'm not here to complain about that comic, I'm here to complain about this comic. Or maybe not complain. Either way, I need to get to talking about Morbius, who was in the Raft but is able to use the Breakout to have his own little jailbreak. But as he leaves, the Lizard taunts him for being a mostly unpopular minor character, and that gets Morby taking a trip down memory lane for a flashback. So we're introduced to young Michael Morbius, whose mean old mother won't even let him go outside and play with his friend Emil because he's different than other boys. Yeah, sure, Mom. What's he gonna do? Fall down a shallow hole and break every bone in his body? Oh, that's exactly what he does? Oh, well shit. Because it turns out Mikey had a rare blood disorder where his blood cells were dying too fast to really sustain his body or something along those lines, so even this shortfall was nearly the death of him. Racked with guilt over what he'd done to his best pal, Emil then dedicated his life alongside Morbius to finding a cure for this strange disease, and that research focused around vampire bats and lots of testing of Michael's blood. Their work eventually won them the Nobel Prize, although this recap of his origins differs from the original depiction in that this time Michael didn't go to the award ceremony, instead staying home because he was too weak to go anywhere. So realizing time is running out, they rent a yacht so they can perform the final stages of their test away from society for reasons. Or no reasons. It was part of the original story, so I guess they were pretty much required to include it here, but there isn't really a reason for it. Morbius pushes them to finish the experiments and test them on him, which they do, resulting in Michael turning into a vampire creature with such a strong need for blood that he goes temporarily out of his mind and drinks the blood of his best pal Emil, killing him. Morbius then flees the boat because he doesn't want his dear love Martine meeting the same fate, as she for some reason came with them on this unnecessary trip. She too would continue to appear here and there in Marvel history, joining a demon-worshipping cult at one point and even becoming a living vampire herself before I guess becoming a full vampire, and then being killed off by Morbius. Her history is completely skipped here though, but I thought I'd mention it. Back in the present, Michael manages to get out of his prison and a short time later washes up somewhere in New York in front of a random homeless man who helps him get new clothes and recommends that he heads to a place called Brownsville in order to avoid the heat of the police searching for him after his escape. So Michael does exactly that, and we'll basically spend the rest of our story there, although I'll admit I'm a little confused as to what exactly Brownsville is. It seems like from the way they're describing it that it's out of town away from New York City. There is an actual Brownsville in New York, but that's a small neighborhood in Brooklyn, and I'm confused as to why superheroes would patrol all of New York except for this one small little neighborhood deep within the city. But Morbius does arrive there by subway, so I guess it can't really be anywhere else, so I don't know. Things don't always make sense. But because Brownsville exists in, I guess, its own little pocket dimension, the streets there have rampant crime and their own little crime lord in the form of Noah St. Germain, who looks like a reject from the band Rancid. I'm just kidding. They'd totally let the guy in. Noah assumes Morbius is a homeless meth head, but still apparently decides he's going to pick a fight with him. At first, Michael feels like just letting it go, but then after St. Germain here walks away, he randomly decides to strike back. Only Noah proves how in control he is of Brownsville by having someone just straight up shoot Michael right then and there on the street, causing the living vampire to immediately run away. But Germain and his men follow, leading to a fight in the subway that's cut short when St. Germain shoots him dead. Don't worry though, he gets better, scaring the crap out of a local artist named Becky in the process. Becky lives in an abandoned theater and brings Michael home with her so he can lie low there, and he'll explain pretty much his entire life story to her for no real reason, and she'll take to calling him Mike, which he doesn't like at all, but it's just so golly gosh darn cute to have this little disagreement between them. She also works as a babysitter for a woman named Wanda that Michael saw yelling at Noah earlier, because Noah wants her little boy Henry working for him, despite Henry just being a child. And to that point, Noah has apparently taken Henry, and we learn they're apparently family, and he's trying to raise him to learn what he calls the family business. Becky and Mike show up to rescue him, kicking off a big fight that sees Morbius rip out Noah's throat before being shot in the throat himself by Noah's girlfriend, Rochelle, killing him for the second time so far. But again, he gets better, and Noah is also somehow still alive. Morbius offers to help save the man's life, but while attempting to do so, Noah wakes up angry, and while trying to keep him from killing himself, Morbius accidentally kills him. That worked out. With Noah dead, they're all suddenly attacked by a bunch of men in suits and creepy Michael Myers masks who grab Noah's body and run off with it in a helicopter. Rochelle then explains that Brownsville was always a crime-ridden hellhole and Noah was just some regular dude named Dave until one day he disappeared, and when he came back, he was Noah and he was the kind of dude you didn't want to mess with. He also had a lot of money behind him, so he took control of the neighborhood and brought some sense of order to it. Now with him gone, the area becomes open again to outside forces, and right away we see that happen with the Magia, or Magia, or Magia, or Maga, or however you want to pronounce that, I don't know, rolling into town. They're like the Marvel Universe equivalent of the Mafia, even though I think also the Mafia technically exists in the Marvel Universe, so they're like the extra Mafia? They try to strong-arm control over Rochelle and her gang that she's taken over from Noah for some reason, but Morbius shows up and declares that both of them are not wanted in this town, because apparently the regular citizens, led by Wanda and bolstered by having a sort of superhero they can kinda claim as their own in Morbius, have decided to band together and take back their town for themselves. Becky even paints Michael's face up on the wall of the old abandoned theater in tribute to his influence. So Michael clears out the gangs from both sides from this building, only while doing so he runs across our old friend, the Gimp. I mean the Rose. I keep doing that, sorry. It's the outfit. You might remember we briefly saw him in my Birth of Venom video, where we saw him doing evil works, such as fixing football games. You fiend! But actually, that was the original version of the character, and this is, like, the 4th version or so, I think? I don't know. Who can keep up with these guys, am I right? Rose explains that he was behind preparing Noah to become the leader in Brownsville, and with him dead, he now wants Morbius to fill the same role for him, doing only what Rose asks him to. We also learn around this point that he was behind that random homeless guy telling Morbius to go to Brownsville in the first place. But, like, Morbius just kind of randomly ran across that guy before news of his escape had even really leaked. Did Rose just have like 100 random homeless guys just waiting around New York City at various points in the vague hopes they might one day run across Morbius or something? Anyway, to ensure control, Rose reveals that he has Morbius' mom and that they'll hurt her if he doesn't comply. Before he gets much chance to do anything though, someone breaks into Horizon Labs where Morbius had been working before while in search of a cure for his vampirism. This then apparently prompts the superior Spider-Man to pay a visit to Brownsville and kidnap old Morby. It seems whatever was stolen was from Michael's old lab, and Horizon didn't have everything there cataloged yet, since Mikey here was apparently working on some off-the-books projects. So Spider-Man and Michael's old pal Max Modell want the living vampire's help now in discovering what went missing. But again, before much comes of that, they're attacked by a mercenary named Hero, who kicks all their asses and steals something from them. Which is a little odd because she's the one who already stole from Horizon Labs, so not sure why she didn't just get the thing, whatever it was, before when she was there. But I guess it is a little explained in that she wants to get their attention specifically, and she fully succeeds at that. Angry at her apparent ability to override his spider sense, Ox Spidey and Morbius gear up and track her down using a signal she deliberately left for them to track. When they fight again, it's pretty brief. Again, ending with Hero teleporting Michael away and Spider-Man, left without a signal to track in a room full of stolen technology, decides he doesn't really care and stays behind to get all the equipment for his own purposes. But where Hero teleports them is simply right back to Brownsville, so they can have front row seats to the end of the world, because the equipment Hero had been stealing for Rose all combined together to make a home-brewed ultimate nullifier. Since it's a knockoff though, and not Watcher brand electronics, it doesn't quite have that kick of the real thing, and instead only destroys, like, a building, and it doesn't really even do that, since Rose hits the theater and everyone inside survives, and it stays up, just starts burning and falling down. The Rose's goal here is to now turn the citizens of Brownsville against Morbius, as they realize their supposed savior only brought the wrath of the heavens down on them, but that doesn't happen. Because Mike was apparently one step ahead of the Rose here and led the citizens down into Monster Metropolis, a city of monsters beneath Manhattan where he used to live, along with other familiar Marvel monsters like Encanto the Living Mummy, Werewolf by Night, and Manphibian. Yeah. Someone actually thought it was a good idea to name a character Manphibian. Manphibian. The monsters make a good point here also that literally all of this would have been avoided if Morbius had just gone home to Monster Metropolis after escaping instead of to Brownsville for no apparent reason. And yeah, that would have made a lot more sense. And though Becky gives him an excuse in him having some kind of martyr complex where he thinks everyone hates him, I don't feel like that really is enough to cover up that this was clearly about plot convenience and, not much else. But speaking of martyr complexes, Morbius has gone off by himself to face down the Rose, and the two have a brief fight, ending with Rose ultimate nullifying Morbius off of a rooftop, sending him crashing down onto a car on the streets far, far below for his, third death in this series? Fourth? I've lost count. That's not my job, that's someone else's job. We then, I kid you not, just skip forward 1 year into the future and see that Brownsville has been rebuilt and Becky is now a successful artist with her own art gallery. She speaks with Wanda about Morbius being dead, but we soon learn that there's more to the story than just that. Back in time again, during his fight with the Rose, the bespectacled crime boss had mentioned a place called North Brother Island, which, for those not familiar with New York, is an actual island in the city with an abandoned quarantine hospital and is currently uninhabited. But in this story, it's the Rose's base, and beneath the ruins of the hospital is an active lab where they experimented on Noah St. Germain. So Morbius, when he again pulls himself back together from being dead like he's Jack Harkness or something, heads to North Brother to seek his revenge on the Rose. The Rose attempts to reveal to Morbius that his mother isn't on the island, but Morbius reveals that he knew that all along, because she's actually dead and he was there when she died. Morbius has by this point realized what Rose vaguely knew all along, that both of them were really just pawns in someone else's game being used for some purpose that neither of them were actually aware of towards a goal that they just couldn't see. So after Morbius rips out the Rose's throat for a drink of blood, that someone reveals himself, though he refuses responsibility of being the one in charge, claiming to only be an investor. And what he was investing in was the regentrification of Brownsville. It seems what he wanted all along was the violence and chaos Morbius brought with him to Brownsville, coupled with the reinvigoration of spirit he gave to the people of the neighborhood by being a symbol for them to rally behind. With buildings now in ruins thanks to Rose's knockoff nullifier and the people living there finally having a taste for taking control of their own lives, contractors and real estate brokers and whatever else are able to sweep across the neighborhood and make a killing off of rebuilding. And that's apparently what this entire story has really been about. Just some crazy rich dudes playing with people's lives in order to become slightly more rich. But since this does essentially help the people of Brownsville by bringing in improvements to their neighborhood, Michael agrees to continue to play dead. Although he does apparently let his good friend Becky know that he's still alive. And that's where this comic ends, although there is significant room left for a potential future story in the fact that the mysterious investor guy was revealed earlier to be none other than Michael's father, Makroya Morbius. Makariowa? Makariowa? I don't know how to say that, but I do know that it's time for the breakdown. So this was a comic. I don't know what more to really say about it other than that. I mean, it was fine. I'm repeatedly surprised by Morbius comics and how they don't ever really seem to lean into the horror aspect I would expect from them, given that, he's a vampire. But instead, they all seem to play out more or less like just another superhero adventure. But why not, I guess? I mean, it's Marvel, and the story works. It does feel like a superhero adventure. It maybe isn't the best written, and it certainly relies too much on jumping forward in time and then flashing back and then jumping forward again and then flashing back like it's an episode of Lost or something. But overall, I enjoy the work of all the different artists on the issues collected here, and it's a somewhat unique take on the tortured anti-hero story that, if nothing else, does what it sets out to do. So I'm giving this a series recommendation level of medium. Like I said, it's fine. It's very unlikely it'll hurt you to read it, but I doubt it's really going to become anyone's favorite comic either. The collected edition gets 1. Spray Paint Morbius. Fight the power! That's mostly a good thing because I mostly just like that image. Is that a t-shirt yet, Marvel? Because it definitely should be a t-shirt. Anyway, the collection contains all 9 issues of the series, plus that bonus Spider-Man issue, and still contains a few bonus covers, both in a small gallery at the end, as well as the occasional one scattered between issues. It's honestly pretty nice to get all of that in a single volume, so despite what I think of the story, I can't really fault this collection. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm not personally that excited about this Morbius movie, so I haven't seen it and I'm probably not going to be seeing it anytime soon, but, maybe you are, and good on you. As you can probably tell, I'm just not that into Morbius comics, even though I kinda like the character theoretically because I like horror stuff, but again, it doesn't really lean into horror very much. I know the movie is supposed to, and if you saw it and you liked it, or you hated it, or you felt pretty neutral about it, absolutely feel free to comment below. Please try to avoid spoilers for everyone's benefit, though. And if you liked this video, then make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I hope to see you next time, right here in the Comic Cave.